All right. Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 1st, 2020, and this is the quarterly planning and review meeting for Kubernetes SIG docs. I say quarterly, ends up being more like 5-monthly, but whatever, here we all are, and it's so good to see everyone. So the agenda link, I posted in Slack, but I'm going to post it again in Zoom chat just so we have it all handy. And what we are going to do, if this is your, actually, let me just really quickly, show of hands, whether on camera or in chat. If this is your first time at a quarterly planning meeting, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. 5. So, and Karen, I know this is probably the first one for you as well. So basically what we do is we have a little time for introductions, and then we'll talk about membership updates. We'll review the previous quarter, basically everything that we've done since the last time that we had one of these planning meetings. And then we'll talk about the specific goals that we set, and whether to carry those forward and whether to add new ones. And after we review all of our previous progress, we take a dance break, a nice movement break to stretch, and then we'll come back from that and we'll talk about proposals for what to do next and how to go forward. So right now the topic proposals are at the top of this meeting. I'm going to move them now to the end. And if you have a proposal that you'd like to talk about, feel free to add it there. Just know that it's now at the end of the agenda rather than at the start. So let us proceed. Introduction. Hi, I'm Zach Corlison. I'm one of your co-chairs. And Jim and Caitlin, do you want to introduce yourself really quick? Caitlin, why don't you go first?
Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin Barnard. I am the newest co-chair on SIG docs, and I'm also the editorial lead on the blog sub-project.
Hey everyone, I'm Jim Angel. I'm also a co-chair and involved with the release in the upstream project as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's a wonderful piece of business to cover. Since our last quarterly meeting, Caitlin is our new chair, and she stepped up when Jennifer Rondeau Bradamante stepped down. So Jennifer is an emeritus of our community now, and we're thankful for all of the service that she offered. We also have some new tech leads. Tech leads are new to SIG docs, and I think it's maybe one of the best choices we've ever made. Our tech leads are Tim Bannister, Karen Bradshaw, and Taylor Dillasall. So Tim, do you mind introducing yourself first?
Hi, I'm Tim. In the working day, I'm an IT consultant. I started contributing to SIG docs to help me get through the CKA exam, and now I found myself doing tech lead stuff. I did some help out on the last 1.18 release.
Awesome. Karen, you want to say hi? Oh, you are super muted right now, Karen.
Muted?
Yeah, I unmuted you there.
Hold on. How's that? Okay. Hi, I'm Karen Bradshaw, new tech lead. I've been contributing for maybe a year, I'm not sure. I'm a former software engineer interested in technical writing and docs processes, and I do a lot of reviewing, so.
Awesome. glad for it. Taylor, do you want to say hello?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Dolezal. I work at a big entertainment company that you probably recognize. I came to Kubernetes about a year and a half. Oh, there it is. I came to Kubernetes about a year and a half ago and started contributing. Really, really love websites, docs, blogs, and have gotten into the release process a few times. My favorite color is red. Happy Wednesday.
Nice. Well, welcome, and thank you to Tim, Karen, and Taylor for stepping up as tech leads for the SIG. Let us go right into the 2019 Q4 and 2020 Q1 review. And ideally, this should take about 45 minutes. So let's talk about wins. I have added some, we'll talk about wins and challenges first. And I've added some wins and added some challenges, but this is by no means complete. So if you see or think of other things that we can add to either our wins or our challenges, feel free to add those. So let's talk about our wins. Our web traffic is consistently climbing. It's continued the rate of increased page views that we've seen consistently over time. And we are now up to 1.66 million page views per week. And that's up from 1.4 million in November of last year. So our traffic keeps going up, and our satisfaction ratings, our analytics, people still act as if they're satisfied with our content. So that's good news. That's definitely a win. We got releases 1.17 and 1.18 out the door, and big hearty congratulations to all of the team, all of the release teams who worked on the docs to get those out the door. And thanks also to Jim for being an effective release mentor for those processes. So right now we have 11 localizations in production. If you go to the language selector at K8s.io, there's 11 languages to choose from. And that's a testament to, I think, the community's ability to welcome new languages in and support new folks getting involved. So Tim.
There are 2 PRs open to add Ukrainian and Arabic, and they look not quite there, but really close.
Awesome. So 11 in production and almost 13 in production. It's exciting. Oh, thank you, Brad, for the better link to the agenda. Okay, so our PR velocity is increasing slightly. When I say slightly, I mean very slightly, but there's some things that I want to point out. Normally, our annual combined issue and PR velocity is about 6,000. We work through 6,000 issues and PRs per year on average. And we're on track with those numbers so far, and that's with fewer approvers and more reviewers. So we're doing a lot of things well. We're one of the big themes at the planning review that we did in the fall was that we were moving into a place with fewer resources, and there was some question about whether or not we would be able to keep doing what we're doing effectively. And I'm happy to say that we are still chugging right along and getting through content at a brisk and effective rate. So that's awesome. And I will also point out that we are still second in the Kubernetes project, only behind Kubernetes for PR velocity. So it's us leading test infra. In the top 3 bracket, there's really a huge gap between the top 3 and everyone else. And we're on the silver medal podium for PR velocity. So congratulations. It's due to an excellent community and an effective community. So thank you. Oh my God, the KEP that we have had open for so long regarding what we do with third-party content and dual source content has finally merged. I am excited by this because it means that we can officially not have vendor documentation or vendor pitches in our documentation. This was a bit of a saga to accomplish, but credit goes to Tim for being willing to drive that first draft and tank aggro for especially the first part of that KEP process. So Tim, thank you very much for leading the way and getting us to where we could have a meaningful discussion and close this KEP out. So other wins. So our repo stats are spikier, but they're still healthy. Yeah, as mentioned, here are the specific metrics for our repo health, and you can take a look at those at your leisure. Other wins. What did I miss? What else have we been succeeding at and doing well? Caitlin, I know that you put together an effective blog team.
We have, so we formalized the blog process into a sub-project, gosh, maybe 6 months ago now. Time is really flying. And that allowed us to bring in more contributors to help with that process. We have, I'd love to pull some numbers for this, but we have really been able to increase the amount of content on the blog just through really formalizing this process.
Nice. Any other wins? All right, then let's talk about challenges. So in terms of content and information architecture, we're still in maintenance mode. We have wonderful contributors, but our ability, we don't have any dedicated technical writers. So I say that with Celeste sitting right there. We don't have a full bench of technical writers devoted to like improving content, improving information architecture. So we're still in maintenance mode. We're not really innovating in terms of our content, and that's a challenge. This model works, but it runs the risk of going stale, and of how we think about information and presenting content in a way that maximizes developer happiness. We've got what we've got, and that's good for now, but it may not remain so for a while. That said, we do have like Celeste is a contractor who's working on several CNCF projects, but is also right now working on making the contributing section a heck of a lot better. So there's some movement there as well. Another challenge, we've had several approvers drop out over the past, really the past 6 months. Some of this is expected, honestly. People move on, jobs move on, people's involvement in open source projects is transient. So it has made it difficult to maintain an active and accurate PR wrangler schedule. So I feel like our attention to PRs has been spiky consequently. We've had a few weeks where there wasn't a wrangler on duty. So Steve.
So can you remind me what the categories are? We have approvers, we have reviewers. So roughly how many of each do we have right now?
Is a great question, and I can pull it up in the website repository. So I am in the Kubernetes website repository, and I am looking at the block starting at line 41. Do you mind if I share my screen really quick?
No, please go ahead. What are you owner aliases?
All right, so this is our current pool of approvers. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's 16 entries in this right now. A couple of these folks I know are not currently active. Like Damini, I think, isn't currently active. Let's see, likewise, Raji is inactive. Jim, did you hear back from Peter?
No, I haven't received a response. I would say most likely inactive as well.
Okay. And then Zach Arnold as well, I know has moved on. So we've got 16, but only 12 active. And that's going to be reflected in the reviewer block as well. I think
So
the only difference. Sorry,
when
go
we
ahead.
do a PR, the PR rotation, does that mean that each week one of the approvers is given that job, or do we choose from this bigger list of approvers plus reviewers?
For the Wrangler, you mean? The PR Wrangler?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that had to be approvers, if I recall.
It does.
Okay. The reason I ask is that I was considering saying I need to be taken off the list, but I could stay on if you're in a situation where you know, I could just do that one thing if you really are needing the people to stay on this approvers list.
Well, thank you. That's a very generous offer. That I would like to defer discussion about what we do with PR Wranglers to maybe a little further on in the meeting.
Yep.
Because we do need, as generous as an offer as that is, we do need an actual plan for like how to respond to churn, because you know, churn is inevitable and healthy even. So I'd rather we take a real shot at the underlying piece rather than attempt to stop it with bodies.
Okay.
So, and that leads to another challenge of approvers dropping out is that we still struggle with staleness of content. We don't have an effective mechanism yet for staling out content and tracking freshness. And that's something that's we've talked about, I think, at the last 2 planning meetings, but it's still an open issue about how to make sure that our content stays fresh, or at least how to track freshness effectively. And the final challenge that I have listed here, release 1.18 was a bear of a release for a host of technical reasons. We saw a little bit of struggle with 1.17, but 1.18 really brought some of the flaws and pain points in the docs release process forward in a big way. So Jim has done a lot of work to suggest ways to automate pieces of the release process and make it, but that's I guess pain in the release process is a challenge that's ongoing, and it's something to be aware of. Other challenges that we face.
I would say it's related to the approvers dropping out is the contributor ladder. I feel like onboarding new folks, onboarding new contributors, a lot of drive-by PRs and a lot of drive-by contributions, and you know, building that contributor ladder up needs to start somewhere. And I don't necessarily think that that's as great as I've seen it in the past.
Great. Other challenges? What else isn't working as well as it could? I've got one to add.
I'll say localizations. I think that the new localizations that are coming on board are not enjoying the experience of getting to the past the post of, you know, we're here.
That's good feedback. Thank you. I added that API reference generation is still like one of the most brittle pieces of our process. Karen has done some really valuable work to update our scripts and respond to a change in how scripts are tagged upstream in Kubernetes, but it's still like a really fragile piece of our publishing chain. It's the thing that I think we do the least well in terms of our like content output. So that's also something to be aware of. All right, so with our wins and our challenges in mind, let us go to our goal review. So this section is me looking at the notes that we took from last time about which goals we decided to carry forward and set as priorities. In each one of these, you'll see, let's see, I'm gonna share my screen again. Right. In each one of these things, you'll see something like this, color-coded bits with a grade assigned. And what this is a wholly arbitrary number between 0 and 1 that, in my estimation, I've assigned. Like 0 to 0.3 is red, meaning it's like a percentage of the way done. 0.4 to 0.7 is yellow, and 0.8 to 1 is green. This is not a grade like the quality. This is just like how much of this did we actually accomplish. And this is also wholly arbitrary. Like this is the work of me, one person, my view. So if you don't agree with this, fascinating. I would love to hear your own opinion, and let's have dialogue around that. So any questions about the grading system before we launch into the review discussion? All right, let's go. All right, so for each one of these goals that we review, the question that we have is whether to carry this goal forward into Q2. So let's see, the first one. The first goal that we had was better admin docs, how to set up a cluster, how to secure clusters. This was, Zach Arnold took this on, and the deliverable that he agreed on at the time was to define a prioritized list of topics that need to be documented for users around specifically cluster administration and security. I put a big fat question mark on this because I know that Zach Arnold isn't involved anymore, but I know that Seth and Peter have stepped up. And Seth and Peter, I wonder if you have input here and would like to share your thoughts.
Hi, I don't know if Seth is on the call or not, but I'm here. And yeah, thoughts. I mean, I believe Seth and I both agree, and the community at large, that security docs need to be improved. So to like what that looks like, we're still kind of getting our bearings in place to and soliciting feedback from the community if you know I know Jim has made some changes and suggestions recently. So yeah, so I mean we'd like more input from the community. So far, it's been a handful of people attending biweekly SIG doc security meetings to kind of identify pain points and come up with, you know, a path forward for improvement.
So on a scale of 1 to 0, or 0 to 1,
right.
what would you assign this? Would you give it like a 0.3, a 0.4?
I'd say a 0.4.
Okay. And should we carry this forward to Q2? Is this work that that you and Seth and the security docs folks want to keep working on?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So normally we do like a hands vote. I can't share my screen and see everyone's vote at the same time, thanks to the magic of Zoom. So Jim or Caitlin, will you count votes for carrying forward? Sorry.
Do we just want to do thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yeah, so just, yeah, so like thumb up, thumb down. It sounds like Peter and security docs forward. So do we carry forward to Q2? Thumb up, thumb down.
See a whole bunch of thumbs ups, no thumbs down. One comment that I would have on this is I think that there's a great effort going on for the security improvement of documentation, but I know both Seth and Peter have both been very busy with getting those meetings rolling. It'd be nice to see what this looks like next quarter. And if there's still kind of this hit or miss meetings, low attendance, maybe this falls back into SIG docs at some point where it's just a subset of our weekly meeting just to get a wider attendance and a wider audience. But like I said, I think the effort is definitely needed, and that's my 2 cents.
I share that sentiment.
Okay. Let's move on to releases. Releases 1.17 and 18. I graded them 1. They're done. They're out the door. Carry forward? No. Let's see. Some notes here. Yeah, 1.17 and 1.18 both had some difficulties with the technical process and having a well done release playbook. It's much better than it used to be, but I think it still needs work. Jim, do you concur?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So let's see. 1.19 and 1.20 carry forward, yes. Do we know who the release lead for 1.19 is on the doc side?
Thought it was, and I'm gonna screw up the name. Is RVE?
Oh, Irvi?
Yes, I believe so. Not entirely sure though.
Okay, that seems right to me as well. Year V is year VFA. Okay. And we won't know about 1.20 for well yet. Okay. So we're not going to vote on releases. We have to do them. Sorry. The content creation skeleton crew. Okay, so we talked about this and we adopted, I think, if I remember this discussion correctly, we were going to workshop how to approach our work, not from a place of being scared about having fewer resources, but how to embrace change and be new and fresh with the resources that we do have. We never workshopped it, so I gave it a 0.5, but I also feel like we're kind of doing that and responding well as a community. So this is really me just throwing a dart at a dartboard. So I guess the specific carry forward is, do we need to workshop our community identity in Q2?
I have a question on that. Does that include like things like being a little more proactive and trying to fill our pipeline with folks who could eventually become approvers? Because I, like, for example, at my company, the timing might be right to say, listen, KubeDocs is looking for new approvers, and let's see if we can tag some folks who can start learning the processes and what have you to get on that journey.
I think that is an excellent proposal. I don't think that's this one. So if we want to reject this one and consider prioritizing instead,
what was this one? I just don't know what this one is.
So this was like specifically around doing the community work needed to make sure that we don't adopt a scarcity mindset. I don't think we need to do it, frankly.
Okay, I thought I was reading the one about community evangelism. I think I was one ahead.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I see in chat there, Karen asked what is meant by workshop, and I'm not too clear on that myself.
I don't think any of us were. So that to me sounds like a giant thumbs down.
Okay.
So should we make it formal, carry forward? Okay. That said, Brad, I think the adding, specifically focusing on adding approvers and improving our pipeline sounds like a great proposal. Will you add that to the proposal section at the end of the agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, so next item, we talked about increasing automation, reducing manual labor burdens. And we had floated the idea of a linter. We didn't take any action on that linter. Yeah, no action specifically on Veil. I would say that we are actively embracing automation wherever we can. So I guess do we carry forward, I would rephrase this not as a specific linter, but as, well, okay, so like what are the specific areas that we need to think about automation for?
Well, as was mentioned yesterday in the weekly meeting by Tim, I believe, squashing commits, especially now that we've flipped around our release process, our merge strategy, sorry. I personally still think Veil might be a good idea, but I also question how that works with translations.
Exactly.
Sorry, what were you saying was a good idea?
Fail. It's effectively a natural language linter, which is handy for us, but it would take a lot of configuration to set up, and nobody knows how it'll work with a bunch of localizations in tow, because at least in my experience with it, everybody who's used it has used it on English language only kind of repositories, but it could be really handy.
So I'd like to step back to the squashing commits thing, because I'll just try and summarize the sort of suggestions I was making yesterday. In the SIG Docs weekly meeting, my idea was that it would be lovely if PROW would magically let people squash their own commit, and that would help support the workflow for people who have never run the Git command line tool but want to contribute to docs. And I think that's what, yeah, that's what that little bit was about.
So just to ask an open-ended question here, does it have to be PROW that squashes the commit? Because there's, for example, GitHub Actions, which can do that for a PR.
That is a good question. Yeah. Maybe one for another time.
Okay,
Well, I
yeah,
think
I figured.
for consistency purposes, ideally, if it's a proud command, then we're staying in the groove and doing all the things using the sort of approved way of doing things. I mean, don't get me wrong, GitHub Actions are fantastic, but first choice is the proud command, I think, just because that's the first thing they'll ask is, why did you do this as a proud command?
So at this point, it sounds like we are interested in it, and that discussion is heading down to implementation details rather than strategy details. So the strategy question is, do we carry forward with attempting to automate everything that we can? And I'm going to propose that we do this not only in Q2, but annually. Let's break that into two. Should we continue trying to automate whatever we can, with the understanding that automation is not inherently good, but let's automate away all the pain points that is possible. So continue automating, yes, no. What's the count look like that on that, Jim?
Looks unanimous, thumbs up.
Okay. Do we do that as an annual priority or as a year-long priority?
Same result.
Okay, but I'm also seeing like folks hesitating. So if you didn't vote for a year-long priority, do you want to say more about why? Okay, carry it forward as a year-long priority.
Not sure if you're seeing the chat, but Karen mentioned just not sure about linting, but good to investigate.
Okay.
And I'll give that a +1 as well on the linting piece there. I know that Contribex is using a linter today, and their justification is that it reduces drive-by PRs doing typo fixes. And I think that makes makes a lot of sense.
I vaguely heard a whisper about somebody wanting to hear the chairs and approvers suffer more, and that's why they didn't want to go with more automation, but I can't confirm that.
I can confirm that my suffering is adequate.
And I also see in chat here that Davey mentions that these new or they're new and don't have an opinion one way or the other, to be honest.
Gotcha. No, that's real. Okay. Contractor funding. So an update on some of the projects that we talked about at the last planning meeting. And it's still true, the CNCF is willing to fund contractors for a variety of improvements, but we need someone to drive. But here's what we agreed on at the time. So we agreed on a new theme for the website. And that the shape of that was applying the Doxy theme to Hugo. I gave this a 0.7 because the work is in progress. We've got the preview sites are up and live and available for testing. More and more content all the time. And the contractor, when I talked to the contractor last week, he said about 3-4 more weeks, even in the COVID-19 landscape. So given my experience with him, I would put that at about 5 to 6 weeks. But even so, like, it's happening and it's getting close. So I guess do we carry forward? I give a strong yes to carrying forward on applying the Hugo template. Others?
I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, plus ones.
Okay.
Indifferent.
Okay, next. Let's see, optimizations. Better experiences for localizations, for releases, Hugo build times, updates and upgrades. Let's see, at the time we said we decided not to adopt an overall policy of optimizing because we needed someone to drive it. But to the extent that someone was willing to drive an individual piece, we're absolutely willing to adopt that. So I put a 0.4 on that because we have made some iterative improvements, and I don't really know what to assign to this. Honestly, like, I feel like a 0.5 is maybe better because, like, we're doing what needs to be done, and our mindset around optimization isn't unhealthy. So does that make sense? Do folks feel differently about this? Tim.
So I've professionally worked with a few firms that are in this space, and I feel like it's not the sort of thing that I'm used to. People usually do it for commerce, but I feel like it's something that, you know, a contractor could make provide much better insights to let us work out what's missing. Like, we know what pages are popular, but we don't know what pages are missing. So I think this is a thing worth doing. And, you know, if it needs someone to mentor it, that's the trouble.
That's the thing. If you're willing to drive it, great.
Yeah,
right,
no,
exactly.
I'm afraid not.
So I guess the question is, do we carry forward? We're not going to prioritize this as a SIG, but if someone wants to drive a particular piece, we support them. Does that seem like a reasonable stance to continue forward? It's what we're doing now. I don't see any reason to do differently.
I would vote that we just remove this altogether, considering it's kind of ambiguous. We all agree in general that optimization is something we should be doing. My vote would be just remove this out of the quarterly planning unless there's a benefit to us discussing this.
And this is in the contractor funding section of the planning.
That's fair. Yeah, I like that idea. As Rihanna McNamara puts it, always be deleting. So vote to remove optimization from the contractor funding section. How's the vote look?
Thumbs up or indifferent, I'd say about split.
Okay. So remove, very good. Another thing that we talked about was SEO improvements. We decided not to adopt it, but to revisit it in Q2. Behold, the Q2 is here. Jim, do you want to talk about SEO and whether that's worth pursuing right now?
Yeah, so that was a comment that came up just in general about improving Kubernetes overall SEO. Since there's been no work on it, I don't see a value in carrying it forward. It might also be a candidate for removal, but if we wanted to fund someone to move that forward and have SEO improved, I'm not against it, but I don't want to speak for the wider community. I just don't know once again, we're kind of in that ambiguous, yeah, we all agree in general, we want to improve and be better, we want to have better SEO, but is anybody actually going to make that call to improve SEO?
Gotcha. Is it worth revisiting this in Q3?
No, I'm indifferent on this. I don't know if any other folks have opinions.
Indifference is not a yes. So let's, I'm sorry, I'm noticing that my internet connection is really unstable. So I'm going to disable my VPN, and please don't hack me, anyone. Okay, so carry forward SEO in Q2. It sounds like that's a no for Jim as a driver. So do we carry forward in Q2? All right, that looks like a big fat no. All right, diagrams. So when we had this discussion back in November, none of us really had a good sense of what would be required. We had a sense of an MVP that we were aiming for, but no real idea of how to get there. David Kipros agreed to drive that, and he has driven it pretty effectively. So is David, are you in the call? Okay. I know that David's still working on it, and I know that he's taking concrete steps to reach an MVP. So we've got a driver for it, and I'm willing to fund it. So do we want to carry forward diagrams for Q2? I'm going to say yes. Let's carry forward. All right, let's vote.
Yeah, I think so. And didn't David share a doc with us, like a scope of work document?
Yes, he did. He's met all the deliverables that he set for it,
Okay.
and he's proceeding forward. So
if you have that at some point, can you put the link to that doc in here if it isn't already?
yes, I may not be able to do it during this meeting, but
Yeah.
definitely get that. And feel free to bug me, because my memory is, it is what it is. So Steve, you had talked about doing a scope of work for how to create video content, and I marked that as a 1 because you did it. So do you want to talk about that and what that looks like going forward in Q2?
Yeah, and I guess I'll do the same here. I'll look up that document and put a link to it in here. As far as I'm concerned, the document is finished, and the work that I'm going to do on this is finished. There are some comments still in the doc along the lines of, now that we've taken the viewer this far, should we also show them how to do this or that? And I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. The way I wrote the doc, it was my best estimate of what would be just the right amount of content for this purpose, which is just to get people to a place where they can start doing what you would do at a doc sprint. But whoever takes this to the next step, I have no objection to saying, oh, well, there's a few more things we want to add. So I consider my work on this done. If it goes forward, somebody else would need to, take that document, arrange for someone to do the work and do the whole follow-up cycle on feedback and that kind of thing.
Awesome, thank you. So how do folks feel about video content? Does somebody feel strongly enough about it to want to drive in Q2?
I would love to help with this.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the motivation for this was The few times I've been at doc sprints, what I've seen is, half the people there already know how to use Git and GitHub, so they're fine. But the people who don't, they spend almost their entire time there getting set up. And we spend a lot of our time helping them get set up. And so I just thought if we could show them a video a week ahead of a doc sprint, they could get themselves set up.
Totally, I love this, and it's becoming a really big barrier to entry with the blog as well, and just a personal interest of mine. So I would love to help with this.
Awesome. So with Caitlin willing to drive, do we carry forward video content for Q2? Awesome. Right. We agreed to do the KEP. The KEP is done. Let's not carry this forward. Well, now we have to implement the KEP. So that's the one piece I forgot to mention in the proposal. So I'm going to add a proposal really quick. Implement the third party and dual source KEP. Okay, moving on.
So Zach, just on that one, does that
Yeah,
just
yeah.
start with opening issues that say, hey, there's this content here and this should be removed because it's third-party content and it's a good first work item? Is that what you're envisioning there? Or
That is a
something else?
great question for when we get to that in the proposal section.
Oh, sorry. I
Okay.
did that again.
It's all good. All right. Can the docs be improved anywhere to reduce complexity and simplify understanding? Can we help lower the high bar for understanding K8s? Back in November, Tim noted that the Linux Foundation course doesn't tie in to the official docs. And at the time, we decided not to adopt it in Q1 and to revisit the question about lowering the barrier to entry to Kubernetes with Steve Perry in Q2. So I gave it a 0.5 because even though we agreed not to adopt it, we have made a couple of iterations that I think are helpful. Celeste added the top level training page. Jim added, yeah, exactly, yes. Well done, Celeste. And Jim added a top level or a handy alias for RBAC. So there have been some improvements to like lower barrier to entry for like the most valuable topics. So I gave it a 0.5. I guess the question is, do we have someone willing to drive reduced barriers to entry in Q2?
I'm willing to drive that because I'm trying to reduce my own barriers to entry at the moment. So it makes sense. But I am interested in what our priorities are in that regards. Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish? I mean, I have just like one suggestion that came up from some feedback I got on that training page from like friends of mine who are Kubernetes users, which is what's kind of the recommended training path. Like, sure, we've got these courses, but what do you actually need to go from zero to rockstar Kubernetes developer? There's a similar issue that I think Remy Leone opened recently too, around the idea of like a Kubernetes skill tree almost, of like, again, what's the path? What's the knowledge path? So I think there's a bit more work that could be done there as well.
This is a very tricky question because there are so many different kinds of Kubernetes users and they need different skills. You know, just the difference between a cluster administrator and a developer who's creating, say, some application that might have 2 or 3 deployments. Those people need, quite different things as far as skills and understanding.
Tim, it looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, I've got some things. I've chucked a topic into the, I can't scroll, Zach's screen. Can I? I've chucked up a couple of things into the later section as well, so I'm happy to revisit this then.
Okay.
And let me see. I need to take my name off of this for Q2 because I won't have time to work on this.
Okay. Steve needs to drop. Okay, so with Celeste willing to drive and with the understanding that this isn't a fix all the things item, are we willing to carry forward lowering the bar for lowering the bar to entry for Kubernetes in Q2?
I feel like that's saying who's all in favor of puppies and kittens.
Basically, it's a softball. Thank you, Celeste, for taking that on.
I got a suggestion here. 2 people that you might contact. One would be Andrew Chen. He's a Googler. And the other would be Dominic Torno. I can't tell you right now who he works for.
SAP.
Yeah. Well, he did. Does he still?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
But anyway, those 2 have been meeting once a week, and I meet with them to discuss the idea of, modeling that would help our readers understand and be able to reason about Kubernetes. The trouble is that we talk a lot, and we're kind of up in the in the philosophical realm, and the only concrete work that's come out of it is Dominic has written several blog posts, and they're great, but it has not translated into any concrete work in the Kubernetes docs because nobody has time. But they would at least be good people to consult on this because they've put a lot of thought into, what are the fundamental concepts that need to be understood.
It's good advice. Also, don't be discouraged if you don't get a ton of response from Andrew. His time for Kubernetes is limited, and he's been very good about setting healthy boundaries around that. So it's worth reaching out. Don't be sad if you don't get much in response.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, if you don't get much response, or if you find that the models, so the only thing I felt concerned about the models is there was so much work to try and get the models to actually model Kubernetes. It worked for the easy stuff, but the harder stuff, it got more difficult with the harder stuff. That I didn't want that to derail you from your excellent goals. So if you feel like taking a different approach, please have the freedom to take whatever approach you feel you need, because there's so much work that needs to be done in this space anyway.
If nothing else, I don't know if we like linking to blog posts, but we could look through Dominic's blog posts and see if we would like to link to any of those in our explanations.
But yeah, thank you for that. I also want to concur with Brad that when you drive, you get to pick. So take the approach that works for you. All right, that is our quarterly goal review. Yay. I am going to hand it over to Jim to lead this section. I need to drop for a few minutes, but I will be back in 10 to 15. So Jim, take it away.
Yeah, let me share out my screen here.
Celeste, did you want to say something? I know you were. Okay, you're good. Okay, cool.
Give me 1 second here. All right, can folks see my screen? All right. Is it look okay for y'all? I know it looks
Zoom
tiny on my.
way in.
All right, let's fix this for y'all here.
I think that's about as good as it'll get.
Much better.
All right. So let me pick up where we just left off here. All right, so for the year-long goals, just kind of picking it up right here where we left off, talking about improving docs process. So this is the overall, I believe, release notes process, the release process in general for Kubernetes. I'm not sure exactly what we were going to focus on for the PR process or PR wrangling, but I believe this is related to what we discussed earlier with approvers dropping out. Do folks have any ideas or thoughts on improving that PR wrangling process?
Well, I mean, let me ask for some feedback, Jim, because I took responsibility for building the PR wrangling schedule, and I built it for the first half of the year, and it seemed like that kind of went okay. But then I just saw, some Slack messages from you that we got to go fill some spots for the next couple of weeks. So the question is I'm about to get ready to do that for the next half of the year, like I did before. But I don't know if there's any way to improve it. We kind of put people in slots, and then as we realize, oh no, they're not showing up and not reachable, we kind of yank them, and so you kind of felt a little more of the sort of the blowback of the approach than I did, I guess. And so I don't know if there's a better way to do that or not. I mean, I was just planning for the second half of the year to go do what I did at the beginning of the year, fill the schedule with the now reduced list of folks from owner aliases.
Yeah,
but if there's, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I remember that that when you did this for your first time, it was due to a lot of the other folks. I know Zach said they hated doing this piece of the co-chair role, and you stepped up to do this. And I believe it was the first time that we took that blanketed list of approvers and then dumped them into the PR Wrangler versus going through line by line. And I think the takeaway here is the lesson learned, such as I know Jun Yi, one of our Korean localization approvers, was scheduled due to that process. And then they said, hey, we can't effectively review English PRs given the nature of their role as an approver for the Korean localization team. So I see this as being lessons learned, where it's an improving process. And do we want to carry forward improving that? I think this is also puppies and kittens.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. I mean, and so I mean, maybe you and I should just have a meeting. I mean, because I want to make sure I'm grabbing from the right list. That is just the English approvers, let's say, and make sure that as I fill the schedule, I didn't do anything silly. So.
Do we have?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, do we have a formal process for approvers who do need to drop out? Because it seems like it's been really reactionary recently.
Yeah,
that is a really good point. I think that's a very fair point, Caitlin, of what you said. Zach's not here for the few minutes, but what I recall is it seemed like he was getting from above the TOC or whatever, just say, listen, we need to be a little more proactive about removing approvers if they're not participating. And so I think that's what you're seeing.
Yeah.
But a process in place would be better so people don't go, what happened?
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Caitlin. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we have a similar problem on the blog, and we don't know to remove someone until they are just not participating anymore. But it's also because I don't think we've made it clear enough what the process is if you do need to remove yourself.
Yeah, and I think we should be clear of like a temporary, I mean, like just sort of taking a step back, because our reality has changed quite a bit in the past month or two. And I think we need to work on one being a bit more flexible to people's needs in dealing with the pandemic and people's responses and their obligations to both family, their sanity, and their jobs. And we also need to set these goals accordingly. So we need to be flexible, but we also need to be able to react with some agility. So I think if there's ways in which we can create a process for people to either step back temporarily, if like I need to take the next 2 months and not do this, and maybe do a hold, and then people who are going to drop out entirely, we should create a process for that. I think that's a good goal to have.
Right. Yeah, and just for accuracy, I mean, so what had happened was the motivation to pull somebody was there was no way to get a hold of them. There wasn't, oh, I can't do my PR wrangling this week, you know, my dog's sick or going into surgery or something. It was literally there was no way to reach the person. They weren't responding. And then the way that Zach had did it was, hey, you can come back anytime. So it wasn't implicit temporary, just to be clear. It was kind of, from that point of view, it was really nice, which was, hey, if any way you want to come back, we'd love to have you. But since we can't get a hold of you in any way, shape, or form, that's why we were doing it. So I think we were kind of close to what you said is all my point, Jared.
Yeah, I just don't think it's very explicit though.
Yeah. So having it more explicit would be really good.
Right. And I think that encapsulates what you were saying, Caitlin.
Totally. I think that was a great explanation of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree, and I believe all those comments are very accurate. You know, and like Brad was saying, that when folks have been basically removed from that approvers list from being inactive, they've always been more welcome to come back. But I agree, there needs to be an explicit process defined, so there's almost a precedent for how we handle these situations and how we move forward there. It seems like there is agreement to move that forward this year. So moving on.
A suggestion for PR wrangling. And this is just my own opinion, take it or leave it. But what I've noticed when I do PR wrangling is that I might see something that has a very trivial change, and it could be just, approve, whatever the two words we say, it's just done, publish. But meanwhile, someone else has gotten in and made broader suggestions like, well, you could become closer to the style guide with these few sentences. And my view on that is that let's just move things through. If somebody does a small change, move it through. Don't get bogged down adding other things to that same PR. And even with style guide matters, if somebody writes something that's contrary to the style guide, but you glance at the entire topic and the entire topic is written contrary to the style guide, then don't bother correcting one or two sentences to bring them into line with the style guide. So that's my view.
Don't try and correct it. So if it was really good content, but against the style guide, would you merge it and then just open an issue and say, hey, this section could use style guide improvements? Or what? I just wasn't clear, Steve, what you thought the best way to handle that was.
Just move it through and forget about it. We don't have time. I mean, it'd be nice if we could do that other thing, but we don't have time to correct the style in every topic. And chances are it won't matter because the rest of the topic is already out of alignment with the style guide.
Yeah, I think it's important to have definitely like maybe file another issue like, hey, you should like let's clean this up later. But I think separating out the technical, like this is correct, let's get it into the content, and then let's clean it up later. I would, the only caveat I would have, Steve, to your point is like, I think we should definitely file a follow-up issue to fix it. But don't let that stop you from committing that change that improves the overall content for everybody.
Right. And what I like about that is that then we create a whole bunch of low fruit for the pipeline we might want to have of folks that become approvers. And what better way to learn our style guidelines than by actually going to have to go do some of that piece of the work.
Yeah, or an upcoming doc sprint where we crank through all those issues later. Like it's lower priority. We can push that down the road.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's really good advice, Steve and Jared. That's good wisdom there.
Does anybody want to take on the action item to make this a little bit more of a formal recommendation? I guess we can vote if we want to carry it forward. And if somebody, I guess we need someone to own it first. And then if somebody wants to carry this forward as less of a suggestion or opinion that we have on this quarterly review, was someone willing to own updating our PR Wrangler guide to outline maybe this posture?
This is Brad. I would own that. Yeah, I'd be happy to own that. And talk about that option.
Okay, and so with Brad owning that suggestion, carry that forward as well. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Indifferent.
Just kidding.
Yeah, Brad votes thumbs down.
Just mixing it up on you.
I appreciate it. You gotta have some laughs now and again.
We do these days.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else related to the PR Wrangler and approving process? I think we've drained that pretty well. All right, moving on to the release notes process. So this, I feel like, can go a few different angles. So today on the release team, the release notes process is outside of docs. So this idea of handing it over to Sasha, I don't believe is necessarily an option. But I do know on the Kubernetes website, there's an actual release notes page that we update manually every single release. And usually it lags behind if there's any patch releases or any future updates to Kubernetes. And if this is around the release notes process automation, I would say this is part of the larger goal that I've been essentially running for the release team and docs to improve the overall release process, where when there's a patch release on the upstream Kubernetes repository, it would also update the Kubernetes release site. And that would turn into handing over to more of the automation pieces into the release managers, associates, or the release managers. Does anyone have any questions on what I'm talking about? Because I know it's a world I'm living in, but it's easy for me to talk about. I just want to make sure all the other folks are keeping up. Tim?
I hate to do this. Sorry, go Tim, then me.
You're on mute, Tim.
Sorry about that. Thanks for the point. I don't think these notes in the agenda/minutes are going to be clear enough to people to understand what this does mean. So that's a concern I have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Zach?
I was going to ask you for like the 30-second summary of where we are.
Yes, so actually it worked out relatively nicely while you stepped away. We focused most of our time on the very first issue here. And we were chatting about improving the docs process for the PR Wrangler piece. And after having a conversation about how we can deal with some of the approvers dropping out, the progress handling some of that churn, the long and short of it is that Brad stepped up to own improving the process, as well as Brad and Jared and Steve had the suggestion to allow the PR Wrangler to make an executive decision to merge PRs, even if they're not exactly in line with the style guide, with the action that they would open up an issue to say, can someone fix this? It's a good first issue for the sake of merging PRs faster, for the sake of maybe a little quality degradation to improve quality of content.
Yeah, but that is also an opportunity to generate more good first issues. So yeah,
that's what I said.
Absolutely. Do you want me to tag you back here, Zach? I know my screen's kind of goofy looking.
I can read it fine, but sure. Yeah, happy to carry on.
Cool. And where we left off was on the release notes process. It's possible I misunderstood what this last item was, but it's talking over handing over the release notes to the to Sasha. And I was saying that there's already a separate release team for the release notes themselves. So it doesn't really impact SIG docs, but it does in line with my overall efforts to improve the SIG docs release process, where ultimately some of that piece would get automated by the release managers. Does that capture what that bullet meant?
Yes. So I guess the vote is, do we agree to hand this over to release managers? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so the release note process today already is handled over to, there's a whole separate release team for that, but there is a specific release note that gets published on the K8s.io website that never gets updated with patch releases. So
yeah. So, sorry, what was your suggestion about how to handle that? That
Yeah, so-
specific aspect?
So my take was this is less about the release notes process. This is more about the release notes that live on kubernetes.io that never get updated. And I can update this to be a little bit clearer and handing that over to more automation in the release manager group, which is part of SIG release.
Yeah, that I agree with that. So does everyone agree with that? I guess is the question. Do we carry, how to phrase that as a votable question? Do we hand over release notes on the Kubernetes website to the release team and contribute automation as best we can? Yes or no? Tim?
Who leads this work?
A good question.
That would be myself.
So Jim is
In
going to
which case
drive.
I'm voting for yes.
Okay. If you vote yes, I see no strong disagreement, but I can only see like 4 people. So
This is Ray. I have a few things to note about this process. So I was part of the 118 release notes team, and there's actually a movement to automate out the release notes process with Krell and for 119. So 119 might be the last release notes team, and there might be a way of Sasha has been doing all the code changes to Krell and Adolfo as well to further automate the release notes process, and this could be added as well for the patch releases, so that patch releases will be automated. But we should bring in Sasha and Adolfo about the patch release updates.
agreed. Cool. That's really good information. Thank you, Ray.
Welcome.
Okay. Security documentation and bulletins. So we had agreed. I'm trying to remember what we talked about in November. I think that the discussion in November was to put more attention where we could into better documenting security documentation and bulletins. So I think like K8s.io/RBAC is a good example of that. Do we want to keep doing work like that with the understanding that it will need that specific instances of improvement will need specific people to drive them? Is that something that we want to continue doing? I would say yes. And again, like, who likes puppies and kittens? So security. Right. And thank you to whoever's coming along and cleaning up behind me. Okay. Better site UX as an annual priority. We already voted on this, so carry forward. Yes. Version skew. Jim, I don't remember any of this. Do you want to talk about version skew at all and whether we're still doing that?
Yeah, so part of this is related to some of the efforts with cleaning up those patch releases, is having some sort of automated version skew. I did open up a PR now that definitely needs a rebase that Tim's mentioned a few times now on my PR, so I'm sorry I've let that one rot just quite a bit. Karen suggested an alternative solution that I haven't had time to review properly. That's really what my blocker is, just time. But this piece here about version skew and docs is really about what's the current release version, what's the latest supported version, what's the deprecation process, similar to what you'd see on kernel.org or Ubuntu. And I added a note at the very bottom here. If you're to go to Wikipedia for the Kubernetes entry, and I'll send it in the Zoom chat here, they have a better release timeline than our K8s docs do. So they actually have a full table and what releases are deprecated and outline dates. It would be great to create something similar to that, or maybe link out to that, or just in general be as good, if not better, than Wikipedia's entry as the official source of docs for Kubernetes. I would like to carry that forward. I'd like to own it. I think that there's probably about a weekend's worth of work to get this started. And so my vote would be yes, with me leading, but that's my opinion.
I'm happy to help with that too, because I agree. Thanks Wikipedia, but if we're serious about being a canonical source, then we need to be canonical, damn it. All right, adopt for Q3. Yes, Jim and Zach. Well, Jim will drive, Zach will ride shotgun. All right. More to say about version skew, or shall we move on?
Nope, that's all I got.
All right. Doc sprints. LOL COVID-19.
Still willing to do this
Yeah.
whenever we get a chance to travel.
I am too. When the world opens back up again, I'm all about it. But for now, let's postpone for now until conferences return.
Sounds fair.
Although this is really a golden moment for like video introductions to contributing to Shine. So Caitlin, I think like this is a magic moment for video. Moving on, leadership transition. So last November, I was very sure that by this time this year, I would be completely gone from Kubernetes and moved on to other CNCF projects. Here I am, and here I intend to remain for the foreseeable future. I'm going to branch out to some other CNCF projects, but I have gotten some pretty strong asks from my boss and from other folks in the community to keep doing this. So you're stuck with me.
Who do you think sent those guys the checks to make sure you would stay? We all pitched it.
A check? I didn't get a check. Wait.
No, your boss. We all sent your boss a check to make sure you could stay.
That said, I also really want to point out that Jim has really stepped up as a leader and as a mentor in the past 3 months. It's been a real joy, Jim, to see you just come into your own as a chair for this SIG. So thank you, you're awesome. And cool beans.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Caitlin is also stepping up. So go.
I was going to say, great job. I mean, and hopefully it's given you some relief. But you know, from what I've seen, obviously, really huge job by folks like Jim, and I'm sure Caitlin as well. But to help reduce the load. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Caitlin is also stepping really powerfully into her role, and I think the next 3 to 6 months will be a powerful growth time for her. So we also have new tech leads who are going gangbusters. Tim and Karen. Taylor, we're so glad that you're joining us. I will admit that I expressed some skepticism given that Taylor is also the release lead for 1.19. I'm like, really? You have time for all of this? But you're the Energizer buddy. So I'm glad we have you. Welcome, Taylor. Tim and Karen, you folks are dynamos, and our PR queue, our review queue, our issue queue have all greatly improved, and some of the technical debt that we faced for a long time has been paid down because of the work that you're doing. So Tim and Karen, thank you. You're amazing, and we're very glad to have you. So Brad, I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on continuing to shadow? I know that you were sort of ambivalent the last time that we talked. So do you want to continue shadowing as a chair? What are your thoughts?
I've really been enjoying it. I don't know if I've, hopefully I've been doing enough on the shadowing side, but I have been enjoying that piece. I like doing it and learning every little thing that I can. I do fight with my other responsibilities, so if I go a little quiet sometimes, that's why. I do a lot of the digital transformation stuff at IBM, and as you might expect, with the COVID and what have you, this has not been an easy time for what I've had to do for my day job, if that makes sense.
Right. Not rolling in spare time right now.
No, but I'm certainly enjoying being that kind of fill-in shadow person. If you're all willing to keep me in that role, I'm fine with it.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you for that. All right. We got through it. We got through the quarterly goals and through the annual goals, and that means that it is time for a stretch break.
I'm going to step away and grab a cup of coffee, but I will be back in 5 minutes.
I'm also stepping away.
My headphones have run out of battery. Been using them all day.
I'm waiting for the show to begin. I unplugged my headphones this time already so I can catch the audio.
Aha.
That's not funny.
Still learning about this headset business.
Zach, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Hey, would someone unmute and say something just so I can hear some sound?
What's that? Can you hear me? Okay. Glad I could help.
Thank you. I guess this is going to go on YouTube, even though I haven't been able to get to the hairdressers in longer than I wanted.
Yeah, I figured I'm going straight caveman. Just let it grow out until we can all leave our house, and then see how burly and caveman person I can look. No audio, Zach. I don't think if you're talking.
Yeah, just wanted to let you know we can't hear words, Zach. Says I'm trying to restore my speakers. Somebody sabotaged our dance party.
Can folks hear me now?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
I thought there was a dance party as part of this thing.
Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah, where is it? Ah, okay, good.
Like bubbles in champagne, it's coming up. I cannot go halfway, no, I will not stop going up, going up. Going up. Held my jealousy tight, I never spoke it outright. I've been blaming you for putting me down, pulling me down. But I know how to float in gravity, in the air that flames on me. I'll be lighter than air if I let it be. Said, I said, you said, I said, you said, all right. Did you really see me cry in the night's drive? Yeah, the sugar inside like it afraid.
Scared Tim Bannister away. Slept without a word.
I stuck a BRB in the chat. Now I was getting one of these.
Approved, approved. It's too early in the morning over here in Vancouver, but
Very nice. Never disappoints.
Woo! One of these days, y'all gonna have to start dancing with me.
I'm usually too busy filming.
I heard that's the tech lead's role to do the dance fill-ins.
Oh, I heard that too.
Whoa, what was that?
Good gravy.
Any idea what that was?
That sounded like a bite order problem.
So every time I get a little better recording, I learn to get my headphones off so I hear the sound. I now learned halfway through to pin the video so I don't switch. By the next one, I'll really be good at this as a videographer for posterity.
And a fog machine would have been perfect for that. All right, I think that's our break. Let us proceed. Let me share that screen. Okay, proposals. I'm gonna shuffle these around a little bit to get these in, I think, the order that's gonna get the most value. Jared, I am moving your excellent advice to the front of the queue. I am going to move my own item right behind that. Let's see. Tim, I'm going to bump you right ahead of Chi Ming. Let's see. I feel like we already discussed the video bit, but that's the link to the Steve, is that your is that your statement of work?
Let me make sure.
I believe it is, and I also put the link also when where we needed it up top. So I think we already covered the video piece.
Okay, so let's knock that out. I can't figure out bulleting right now. Jared, you have some really sane advice about quarterly planning, and I wonder if you would give that to us, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, it's more advice like setting expectations for how to deal with our situation and its current reality. One second, I'm gonna put on some headphones. And basically what I wanted to put out to folks here is that we are going through a global pandemic right now, and most of us have the luxury and the privilege of working from home and contributing to this project. But we all have obligations, and we have help that we're giving other folks. We have maybe health concerns of our own. And I just wanted to set expectations for folks when they do planning this quarter and possibly next quarter, that you pace yourself because there's going to be requirements that are asked of us for, and heroics possibly, that are asked of us outside of Kubernetes. And give yourself the space to rise to that occasion should you need to, or to take a mental health break should you need to as well. I'm asking folks on my own team to, honestly take a mandatory 1 day every month mental health break. Take one every 2 weeks if you need one for my team. And I'm just suggesting for folks as we do planning here to maybe not go for heroics in this particular project because much of us is going to be demanded by the larger world in our work. So as we put these goals together and our plans for the quarter, definitely keep that in mind. There's a larger world that we live in. The larger world is going to need us. Kubernetes is important, but our families, our friends, and our communities come first. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks to chew on as they do this planning, and to acknowledge the realities that we in our communities face right now.
Yeah, just to follow on that, Jared, I know lots of folks, where, just to give concrete examples, you have both folks working and now they've got to split days because they no longer have childcare. So one person works Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the other one works Monday, Friday, and they switch. And, including myself, my son is now home all day until May 15th. And I can just tell you, my productivity personally is not at the level as it was before all of this. And there are just times I have to take time to actually go do things that are not work related, right? And that just didn't have to do before, but if I don't do it, wheels are going to come off at my house, right? So I think that's really, really good advice that people just have to understand. Be comfortable not being, so many of us are, comfortable being at 90% productive, 100% productive, maybe a little more than 100% productive. And now we're facing, I can't do that. I can't do that this quarter. I'm more 70% productive or whatever your number is. And you just have to just really take the good advice that Jared gave to heart, because it's going to be kind of rough like that. And so does that make sense, Jared? It's just kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. We're all trying to help. We're in this project because we want to help out the success of Kubernetes. And we a lot of us have that spirit that we carry with us, and we also want to help out the communities that we live in, the families that we have. My mom is immunocompromised, and so my brother and I are taking turns, taking care of her, making sure that she has groceries and things like that, and just keeping in touch. We all have these obligations that we have, and take those to heart, and consider
Very
those
well
as we
said.
do planning.
Yeah.
Very well said. We are all going to drop things, and maybe just be mindful of, in the calculus of dropping things, knowing what's plastic and what's glass. All right. let's talk about implementing the third-party and dual source KEP. So AMU KSIG opened an umbrella issue, 15748, 15478. I can't remember the exact issue, but that issue, because of all of the discussion, because it's turned into a huge discussion thread, I don't think it's useful anymore to serve as an umbrella issue or like a tracking issue for all of the content that we need to find and then replace. So we need a new umbrella issue for third-party and dual-sourced content. I said initially that I would do that. I would be willing to hand that off to someone else. Specifically to, and I want to scope that specifically to creating the umbrella issue. Is there someone who would be willing to create the umbrella issue that identifies all of the places of third-party and dual source content in the docs? You don't have to do it all at once. You can build off of the work that Amy already did in the pre-existing PR. Is there someone who is willing to open and own that issue? Tim?
I haven't got my hand up for the reason you think. I want to warn people, this does come with like a little bit of a risk of a flame war, and I think it's worth pointing that out.
Yeah, thank you. That is very accurate. Just because this KEP has passed doesn't mean that the people whose content will be affected will like it. There's going to be a fair amount of, you're doing what? You didn't talk to me about that. Why wasn't I consulted? I have very strong opinions. And as we go to implement this KEP, all of our responses need to be oriented around, this is not a discussion about whether this will happen, it is happening. The only discussion is about when a particular piece of content will be removed from the documentation. So one thing to highlight from the KEP discussion is that we offered the entirety of the 1.19 release cycle for stakeholders with affected content to figure out what to do with their content, to rehome it, to refactor it, to do whatever. So this will not be an instantaneous process. We're looking at realistically a 3 month, 3 months to get all of this done. That's not to say that it's 3 months worth of work, just that it will take, it'll be 3 months before we can cross the finish line. I don't know, if someone is willing to, well, okay, now that I think about it, it may be best if I open the tracking issue and then we can just open like removal PRs from there. Okay, so I will continue doing that. I will take the action item for the umbrella issue. What I'm going to encourage approvers, especially approvers and reviewers, to do is to make sure that you understand what our guidelines for third-party and dual-sourced content are. And those guidelines are available at, let's see.
I can throw it in the chat.
Thank you.
How about in the agenda doc as well, Tim?
Yep.
Thank you.
I cannot do this and like navigate Zoom at the same time.
I'm pretty sure Tim's just thrown it in the chat, so you're probably okay.
Okay. So the content guidelines, make sure that you read the content guidelines. So we accept content that is related to third-party projects that are in the Kubernetes project that are necessary for Kubernetes to function. And that's not ever going to be a hard list because projects are moving in and out of the Kubernetes project. Read that content guide and make sure that that you know what those guidelines are. If you have any questions, ask away. Ask away in GitHub issues, ask in SIGDocs Slack, ask on email. It's better to surface questions than to let content through. If you open a PR to remove content that doesn't conform to the style guide or to the content guide, and you get pushback, please let me know or let one of the chairs know. Again, this is not a question of whether. All of that has been decided. SIG architecture has got our back. Steering committee has got our back. So it's not a question of whether this content will be removed. That is a done deal. If anybody tries to tell you, oh, this is too important, no, unless it meets those criteria, it's not going to remain there. And likewise, we don't accept PRs for non-conforming content. So if you get any pushback, if anybody hassles you, definitely if they break the code of conduct, let us know. But if anybody even just gives you a hard time, please let us know, because that's not something that you need to tank. That's not something that docs contributors need to tank. That's something for the chairs to do. So don't let the fact that this, I guess, don't let the possibility of flame war detract you from doing the work, or distract you from doing the work rather. But yeah, it is okay to be generous with folks. If you open a PR to remove content, and they need the stakeholders for that content need until the end of the 1.19 cycle in order to do that, that's fine. Just put a note on it, and we'll once 1.19 merges, we'll like do a big like a round of approvals to remove all of the pending content removals. Any questions about third-party and dual source content? I know it's new and potentially confusing. So what folks do questions have about it?
What questions do folks have about it?
What did I miss?
You said what folks do questions have?
It's a COVID-19 world, Timothy. Be nice to my poor frazzled brain.
Yeah,
what questions do folks have about it? Yeah, Karen.
Can I ask? So what percentage do you think of the documentation has third-party or dual source content today?
Based on what Amy found, I would say not much, honestly. We're looking at maybe 20 to 30 pages tops. Does that seem right? Oh, sorry, Karen, you're muted. Karen, you're muted.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay, I said I have no idea. I just thought I'd ask, what you thought about it. So that's it.
Based on the previous discovery, would say like 20 to 30 pages. Other questions? Other questions had by folks?
To what extent are the changes that need to be made to those pages kind of substantive? So like it's going to involve some rewriting of the content and some reinterpretation of the content versus kind of a quick deletion?
Almost all of it is a quick deletion. The SIGs responsible for that content may want to do things differently. They may want to refactor their content a little bit, but most of it is outright removal. I would say like a good 80 to 90% is outright removal. A good question.
The page about the page for the service concept is massive and has a whole load of vendor specific stuff in that. I think that page will change a lot and become shorter.
Anything to shorten that page is a good thing. But yeah, that's probably like that page alone is probably responsible for like a good 5% of the mentions. Other questions? Ready to move on? All right, let's move on. Tim, you say let's document config map. Tell us more.
Yeah. It's a thing that's in Kubernetes. It's not documented as a concept. It should be documented as a concept. It's one of the things I find hardest to explain to people. And I would like to take this forward with help.
I'd be happy to help.
Great.
This is a very straightforward kind of technical writer, subject matter expert relationship. So I propose the next step being you and I do a one-on-one call and hammer it out.
Yeah, we should probably, yeah, okay. Any other takers?
I'm certainly willing to help with reviews, and if you need suggestions, I've written extensively before in a book about config maps, so I you know, happy to help review or what you need.
Cool. It's a I know, important gap.
Yeah, it's a very important topic.
I'm surprised that's missing in the documentation. Honestly, I'd never realized that.
Yeah, I was shocked to hear you say it, and then I immediately realized, no, you're right. It doesn't exist.
Oh, we have a task called configure a pod to use a config map. So as you work on the conceptual, if you want a concept topic about this, I'd suggest, looking through what we have in the task and making the two work together and link to each other.
Nice. That sounds eminently reasonable to me. We've got people to drive it. So let's up or down vote. Let's document config map. All right, that looks solid.
I was going to say you can find my vote in an environment variable. Anybody get that joke?
That's pretty good. Okay. Tim, Celeste, Brad, what kind of, I guess Tim and Celeste, Brad, if Brad, you're going to review, Tim and Celeste, what kind of a time box do you want to put on this? Do you want to put one on it at all? Do you want to say broadly Q2? So that would be April, May, end of June.
Personally, I think broadly Q2 is. Sorry, you go ahead.
I agree. Broadly Q2.
Yeah. My question would be, like, are we looking basically at a concept topic, more or less?
I think whole new concept page and whatever we find we want to link to that we then like go, whoa, there's, you write the page, there's a what's next section, you're like, I can't link to this, it doesn't exist. Okay, new issue.
Okay. Yeah,
it looks to me like the current task topic is gigantic, and some of the headings in there say things like understanding this or that. So maybe some of those understanding sections could be pulled out of the task and put in the concept topic and revised.
Sounds good. All right, are we ready to move on? Let's move on. All right, so Qiming asked that we discuss this particular pull request, 19526. If I remember rightly, Karen, I think you probably have like the most involvement and background. Like I wish that Qiming could be here, but it's like 3 a.m. for him. So Karen, are you comfortable giving like a summary of this issue? Because there's like a ton of discussion on it.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I did go through it before this meeting and kind of look through it again. Yeah, my biggest concern with it is I empathize with the localization teams and the need to get an easier way to write links and have them sort of automatically happen for them. But I do have a problem with, I think I have a problem with sort of changing the way authors write links in a page as far as using that short code. And so there's 2 short codes, I guess. And I guess Bep from Hugo also chimed in at the bottom of this issue as well and suggested the render hooks, which is like webhook. And I did a little test of that. And that's it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure that that's the right way either, but I'd love to know if there's like a standard way of that localization teams actually use Hugo to, get these links right, because it seems like the render hooks is also a little bit of a kludge too. There's some examples of the links and how the shortcode modifies the links in this issue. You'd have to look through it. There's a lot of examples. So he suggested this, portable Hugo links. So I don't know what others think about it, but I'm not completely sold on either issue, either solution, but I'm interested to hear what others think. Basically, the webhooks approach is a rewrite, and you'd have to actually create a template. He gives an example, and it's really, it'd be up to us to decide how we really want it to be. And he suggests not to use the shortcut, because that's how I interpreted
it. You mean Bep?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, gotcha.
I just don't like the way the shortcode's used.
Okay.
I think there's going to be, we're opening ourselves up to user error in creating these links. That's my biggest concern with it. There's not sort of one way of saying, hey, folks, this is how you write this link. There seems to be, a number of ways you could write links. And I think it's always good to standardize on some way. So anyway, go ahead.
Tim. You are so muted.
Oh, yeah, I'm not getting this. If people can hold things, like if you can hold it wrong and it's detectable and there's a particular way, that sounds like a job for a linter. I wonder if there's actually a hard dependency on having a linting system in place before we adopt this. What do people think?
I think we should be linting for links anyways, even though it's a high cost activity for a site as big as Kubernetes. Like even when I was just doing the contribute section, there were a lot of links that were super duper broken and had been broken for a really long time. And, and that was it. I agree though. I think there needs to be some kind of link checking or linting, which will open us up to a Pandora's box of horrible things that need solving. But will be good to solve.
I did want to add in real quick. I made a comment there saying that, maybe this is something we could merge and iterate on top of. Karen, you've done more investigative work on what the recommendation from BEP was. So I don't want to sound like that's the preferred method moving forward by any means. This is somewhat in line with when we were talking about being a PR wrangler and potentially merging and iterating on top of and maybe opening an issue as far as this doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. My opinion was more or less that it doesn't break things from a technical perspective. It helps out localization teams in a minor, area here. If it works as is, maybe we merge this and we have somewhat of a fragmented state that benefits some and maybe not all. Just my 2 cents, but I wanted to be very clear that I wasn't saying we should go with BEP's recommendation or we should do it an alternative way. And also my LGTM is more or less saying this works and it's a solution for localizations today. And that's about where my opinion stands. And good to get that, and hear it in person versus a GitHub comment, I guess.
Yeah, well, the other thing is if, we haven't actually seen it in pragmatically as far as how will a translation team actually use it. We don't have an example of a changed page from, say, a team. And then if a page does not exist, we brought this up on the issue, whether there's a 404 returned, or we create another page that says, sorry, this content is not available in this language. That's kind of a separate issue, but it's part of this issue. I think my biggest concern is just making the leap of saying this is the approach we're taking. I think it's good to kind of decide, yes, we've thought it through, and this is the answer, and moving forward versus doing a piecemeal approach. I'm okay with deciding one way or the other, but just to make a decision and say, this looks good, this is why we think this is the right approach, versus starting on something and saying, oh, we got to back out 5 files or, that sort of thing, and letting a translation or localization team take off with it. So I don't know. I think it's worth prototyping or figuring out which is the approach you want to take. I'll be quiet.
No. This is really good discussion. So yeah, my concern with adopting this approach is that I am not at all sure this is the best way. And I'm also not sure that the best needs to become the enemy of better. Tim, I think that is a really interesting and powerful question about whether there's a hard dependency on the presence of a linter to make this work. Yeah, broken links, as much as I complain about reference stocks being frail, broken links are sort of this secret fragility of the site. And I think it does a lot of damage to user experience in ways that aren't obvious. So I guess I'm fine with adopting a different approach to make linking easier for localizations, but I don't want to do that without addressing the underlying UX issue of broken links. So Karen, I agree. I'd like to see a prototype of this as well. I'd like to see like a mini production environment of what this could look like. Well, okay. Let's think about this in terms of harm mitigation. If we don't merge this PR, what happens? What damage is done if we don't merge this PR, Tim?
Could a contractor help us answer these questions? Is this a thing where CNCF financial resources could be useful?
Oh golly, yeah, that does sound like a really good question. And Björn, Eric Pedersen, would be the person to recommend a contractor to do that. Although if we do that, like Bep is very, very knowledgeable and very strongly opinionated about how things should be. So Karen, if you have any reservations at all about the rendering hooks approach, now is the time to express those, because if Bep believes they're right, that's what Bep will direct us towards a contractor to do. So like, are you comfortable with the rendering hooks approach versus this one? Are you like agnostic? Like not knowing is like, I don't know, so.
I don't know. I'd have to investigate it a little bit more, or at least have someone else try to investigate it as well. You know, contribute to it and see, explore what are the options.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of how we can scope this to an actionable discussion. So I think one question is, do we approve this now or not? And I don't think that this is a simple yes or no. I think it's yes, yes and, no, no and. And based on what I'm hearing in the discussion so far, I personally am leaning towards no, and let's not approve this right now, and let's do the investigation to find out what it would take to approve it.
So I have a question about this. This is a naive question because I don't really understand why this new format for links would help. But couldn't we, instead of putting in the effort into formatting all of our links this way, have someone write tooling that would, as a kind of a pre-flight on translation, go through and find all our existing links and convert them to this format, and then they would be translation friendly?
It's a good question.
I think the render hooks, what it does is it does a rewrite. So it applies this template as the last thing, and the processing, and it basically converts the links. You can make it so it converts the links. You can write the template. It's up to you to make them localization friendly. So it's possible to get it to work. It's just, my question is it the right way to do this? You know, do we have sort of confirmation that it's not a hack? I'm sure it can be done. You know, it's just, is it really the right answer? If it's the right answer, great. You know, the script is kind of easy, but to write, I think.
Well, which script is easy?
Well, it's a template. So it would be a Hugo template. And I did a little testing in another issue, another PR rather, but it's not, I didn't complete it. I just basically did a little experiment and saw how the template could work. And it does a rewrite of the links, but I didn't actually fix the template to do the interpage links. So if you have like a, links within a page, that wasn't getting rewritten, but it's rewriting the links. So my question is why can't Hugo actually offer this as like something that's, part of Hugo? So why is it something that has to be written as this extra template? That'd be my question to ask, Deb, is why is this not sort of a core component of Hugo?
I guess my question is along those lines. It seems odd to me that we have to make this kind of a change throughout the English source code. Why couldn't tooling just detect our ordinary links and take it from there?
I think this is the tooling that does that, if I'm understanding the discussion correctly.
Well, I thought the proposal was to go through our docs and change all of our ordinary markdown links into this new format that's more complicated.
Let's see.
The answer, I think, is yes. I think this issue or this PR is proposing to use the ref or RelRef shortcode versus their, Beth brought up that there's a new render hooks or webhooks as part of a later version of Hugo. And that is, in that case, you basically write this template. It's only available with the Goldmark parser. And the template basically gets read through and it goes and it changes the links according to what you've specified in the template. So it's really would be up to the docs team to do it. My question is, why is it kind of not standardized as a standard template, in Hugo?
Sure.
So I wrote, I think my PR is probably linked, but I just showed kind of how the links were rewritten. But again, that could be kind of a hack. So.
Hey, Karen, I took a look at your PR real quick and pulled out the file I believe you're referring to and put it in chat here for the render link .html. Let me know if that's not the right one. But
That's it.
Okay, so Zach, if you click the link in the chat or copy that link out, that's a specific file that is doing the templating.
Oh, is it this one? Or, sorry, which one?
In the Zoom chat?
Sorry, I've got to exit my screen sharing in order to be able to see the chat.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good. Right. Is this the right one, the render link? Oh, geez. Jim, do you want to tell us more about this particular file?
I would defer to Karen.
Okay, so this, Bep has, I think in the Hugo docs, you'll see something very similar. And there's, I didn't clean up this file entirely, but it offers, the main part is the rel lang URL is what I added in, and the rest of it is pretty much what Bep provided. And to rewrite the link. And you know, it could, there's some, I did a little surfing and found some more information from another contributor to Hugo about adding in, modifying like the lang for the links. So if you noticed in the pull request and the preview that I provided that the, some of the links are not correct. So the intra-page links are not correct. So that would have to be changed. The template would have to change. And here I've given an example. He gave me some links and I showed him how they were actually rewritten on the page, in the Chinese page. And so, but the, you can see the page, let me see. So these were all rewritten. They used to be just docs, concepts, and so on.
Okay. So,
down, you know, the TOC links are not correct anymore.
where do you mean the TOC links on the page, on this page preview? Or on, I guess, wherever that is. Okay, so. So these links right here are not correct anymore. Am I hearing that?
Might be on mute, Karen.
I can't remember whether it's that or further down. Those checks.
Right here.
That worked? Okay. Go up, then I would say. Yep.
Try these.
Yeah, those. Try this.
So is it safe to summarize this as the solution is either updating the markdown with that rel, as Qiming mentioned, or this where we're templating and changing all the URLs based on some sort of Hugo programming method, I guess? Is it the simplest way to put this?
I guess so, yeah.
So it's a markdown solution or a kind of a Hugo solution, if you will.
Well, I'd say it's a shortcode solution, right? Using the shortcode, built-in shortcode, or you have to write your own template.
Got it. I appreciate the clarification. This makes a lot more sense now after talking.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yes, tech leads. Congratulations, you have successfully tech led. That was, yeah, no, that's really helpful. So with that in mind, is it a short code fix or a site templating fix? for me, it becomes the site templating fix becomes far more preferable. And it's like going through and like rewriting all of the links in our site just seems like a really cumbersome fix to apply as short code. And if we can handle that all through templating, that seems like a much better way of preserving the readability of Markdown, and I guess minimizing the surface area of things that can be damaged by the approach. That said, I mean, it doesn't solve the broken link piece underpinning it all. So it sounds to me like the best approach is to say no. We recognize that this is a problem that exists. A short code is not the way to fix it. The render hook approach seems preferable. Yes, we will have to update Hugo, but as like Jim, I think I recall you mentioning in that thread that like getting to Goldmark is preferable anyway, to which I like added thorough +1. And there's also we also need to look at solving for broken links more widely, not necessarily as a dependency or like as a hard linting dependency, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to run a link linter.
So just as one add-on to that, which is before we start any solution to the translation link problem, we need to be able to start from a consistent baseline, i.e. a place where we know all links are working, or else we'll never know if anything broke because of our little templating change. So I don't think it's a dependency, but I think there's a path that must be followed there.
It's not a dependency in the sense that we think of like a library dependency, but it is absolutely like a step dependency. Agreed. Because otherwise it is exactly that. It's unverifiable. Okay. So how to summarize that into action? It sounds then like the path is no to adopting this short code, yes to adopting render hooks, and ensuring that broken links are fixed before we begin. Does that sound, do those three things? No to fixing by short code, yes to fixing by render hooks, and depending that work on working links. Does that sound like a reasonable path to adopt for addressing this issue? So yes, no. Karen, you seem torn.
Well, my only concern is that Chiming hasn't had a chance to voice his opinion. So yeah, that's my only thing that I don't want to say, hey, we decided this, sorry for your ideas. You know, I think it'd be worthwhile to at least include him, you know, in saying, this is why I think this would work, or this is why it shouldn't work, or whatever. So yeah. Anyway, that's my only reservation. So
that's a good one. That's a valid one. So yeah, points for moving towards inclusion. So how about if we take our consensus discussion to Chiming and say, all right, this is what we discussed. This is our feedback on this. What's your take? Does that seem reasonable? I also don't want to get mired down in like extending this issue out. So can we work on a fix for broken links independent of any particular implementation of localization links? Okay, so working on broken links into like Celeste, are you willing to drive that?
I am willing to drive that, though I think I might need backup from the tech lead squad to actually get things working. This is a little outside my skill area, but I'll push.
Tim, Karen, Taylor, are you willing to help out with broken link fixing in whatever configuration seems best? Karen says yes.
I would run this at idle priority.
Gotcha. Nice. Okay, so to recapitulate, fix broken links. Then approach teaming and say, after looking at it, we don't think that a short code is the way to implement this. We think instead that render hooks are the way to go. We need to fix broken links regardless before we do any work in order to make sure that results are verifiable. Is that an accurate assessment of what to do, of what we've agreed to do?
I want to just tweak the tiny bit of the wording. We need to either fix or accept, and like, you know, one of the ways people do linting is saying, yeah, here's the code base. There are these 400 linting errors. Let's alert if there are 402.
I didn't quite follow.
You log known failures and you warn, and you can track new failures that you didn't already know about.
Gotcha.
So it's a nuance on the wording.
Sure. With agreement for implementation and iteration on how exactly we communicate this and implement it. Does that seem reasonable to folks? Yes? Okay, cool. Whew, that was a thorny one. All right. Very good. All right, so we've got a half hour left. Brad, you have an item to talk about being more proactive at trying to fill our approver pipeline and having a more formal process for mentorship and identifying candidates. So with the understanding that we have one item to follow, talk to us.
Sure, this shouldn't take long at all. The thought process here would be to be more proactive at trying to identify candidates who would, you know, if they're willing to put in the time, could be put on a path to becoming, say, an approver. And usually the difference is, so right now we're more sort of a lazy approach, right? People show up, they start contributing. Like many of the newer folks that have done here, they do a great job, and you know, magic happens, they become an approver, and you know, they've done it. This is a little more proactive, where we actively try and get the candidates, and it's a little more formal process. Say, hey, listen, if you come join us and you start learning through one of us as a mentor, you start learning, you know, our style guideline, our processes. You come to our meetings and start doing what have you. You'll be on a, not a fast path, but a fairly fast path to become a reviewer and then an approver. So it's
a
actively
well-lit path, shall we say?
A what's that? I'm sorry.
A well-lit path.
A well-lit path. I like that. Very nice. And so, you know, it's a matter of sort of a little more formalism, because the people understand they're actively being recruited for this role. For example, I would look across my company for good candidates and say, hey, if you're interested, and I understand it's a big commitment, but if you're interested and you're willing to start learning the ropes, and we'll get you a mentor from one of the, either a tech lead or a chair or somebody, that would be a targeted way to try and increase our number of, say, reviewers / approvers. And sometimes that works a little better, because the people feel like, oh, these people really want me and really want to me to succeed, and I just need to put in the work.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be good to adapt or to adopt a more proactive stance for recruiting, especially for like an approver pipeline. So one thing I can do is surface more of what it is that I'm already doing. So like I don't mean to single you out, Karen, but so I approached Karen and said, hey, I really love the quality of the reviews that you're providing. Do you want to be an approver? And likewise for being a tech lead. So there is some activity in the process. It's just not always visible. But yes, I agree that being more consciously and intentionally available as mentors for the process is a good thing. That said, I also want to be mindful of Jared's advice to us to be really intentional with how much energy we have to be like meaningfully available. Because I think the last thing that would be helpful right now is to promise people a well-lit path and then not do the work to light it. Like, I think that would be more harmful than being sort of passively available, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And we could do it in a distributed fashion where for example, I could look for recruits, but I wouldn't recruit more people than I couldn't mentor myself. So does that make sense? So I wouldn't necessarily do the old recruit and hand off like we all think Brad's going to do. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. But just to have that mindset, it's really more of a mindset. So just like you are doing, but hell, you would, being that proactive, hey, I think, and everybody feeling comfortable, because normally, unless we say, hey, that's okay, I don't think any of us would have felt comfortable, or at least I wouldn't have, to make aspirations of, hey, why don't you come work with us? You'd make a great approver. There's a well-lit path. I would feel out of place to be that proactive, because, what if I picked some crazy person, right? And then you're like, Brad, you brought the crazy person, right? So it's more of a mindset saying, hey, this is okay. It's okay to kind of be the group of us to be a little more proactive and try and do these things.
I think it absolutely is. And I'm sorry if you've ever felt like that was something that you couldn't do. I apologize.
No. I mean, I always could, but I want to make that kind of promise, like, oh, we're acting, because I didn't know the thing of, how long to become an approver. So that's all.
Right. Well, to speak to a couple of your points, if you brought a crazy person, I feel like our community is strong and healthy, and we would have, I'm not worried that there wouldn't be adequate pushback to say no to the crazy person. That said, we're all a little mad here. So,
Wait, can we vote on that?
Hyperbole. I'm speaking a little hyperbole, but you know my point. It's more of a mindset now.
I can give you my word as a chair, and I don't want to speak for Jim and Caitlin, but I can give you my word that I am really committed to a healthy community that is welcoming to people and has really strong, respectful boundaries, really strong, respectful language, and reducing any and all barriers to participation from anyone of any background. That's why I get I know I sound like a broken record when I'm like, I need to script myself. I need to script a bot that just says, anytime someone says guys, just says folks. But there's a reason why I do that, and it's because language matters. So my own commitment to making us an inclusive and possible environment, and welcoming environment, is very high. And everything that I know of our co-chairs and leads is likewise.
So this is more of a mindset. I will personally start doing this. I'm going to actively look for folks, and like I said, it's more just letting them know, "Oh, we really are trying to grow our numbers, and you will get some mentoring. And like I said, I can just take ownership for what I'm willing to mentor. I won't promise anybody else's cycles. But if the other people want to feel that way too, or if somebody says, "Oh, I do have cycles, so if anybody finds anybody, let me know," that's fine too. But yeah, there's more of a mindset initiative, because otherwise we're so busy we don't really think about recruiting.
That's real.
Gotta get people into the cool.
Sorry,
Tim, go for it.
I was going to say that I believe there also might be a more passive approach, going back to Jared's comment earlier about not everyone having the ability to foresee the future. I mean, we all don't know really what's going on. Everything's pretty unpredictable. But for example, I kind of linger around Contribex, and they do meet our contributors. I think it's monthly meeting. And I was on Slack while they were talking about their monthly meeting, and there's a lot of folks out there who get into contributing to Kubernetes at more advanced levels in the project that start with documentation, and documentation being that entry point for them to contribute. And just by being present, I heard someone make a comment about trying to start contributing, and I'm able to send a link to the site saying, "Hey, find us on Slack over here," or "Here's how you can get started." I don't know if it helps anybody, but if they have the capacity to start an initiative of that sort, pretty much just putting it out there. Passive ways to help, passive ways to, I hate the word advertise, but say like, "Hey, we're here." And if, maybe you're not a technical expert and you can't do some of the more upstream Kubernetes contributions, if you don't know the community, or if you don't know what SIG means, or you don't know what KEP means, all these kind of prerequisites to being effective in the larger community, Docs is happy to welcome you as as an entry point there. And I think that there's things we can do passively to encourage that.
Mm-hmm. And certainly I could tweet, "Hey, just a reminder, SIG Docs is always looking for new reviewers and approvers, and if you have interest, reach out." Very,
Doing
very
that in
light
community
touch.
as well too. Yeah, and it's just sometimes it's as simple as saying, "Here we are." Caitlin, I also I think. Well, Caitlin and Steve, I think this is a moment for video to shine. Having basic videos for contribution is a way of providing a well-lit path for new folks to come in and join. So, Caitlin, do you have any thoughts around video and smoothing the path for new approvers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of intro to get GitHub, all of that is really the one barrier we see. But it almost seems like there's room for more introductory videos as well along that way. Talking about if people don't understand even what a SIG or a working group is, how can we make it really easy for them? Because me being able to provide a video to teach you is a lot easier than me dedicating an hour of my time to get you up and running.
That's real.
Or and I've actually, my role has gone more digital. I've actually just installed a tool called OBS, which is for streaming and recording videos, and allows you to have multiple views and inserts. It's a pretty cool tool. I guess all the video gamers use it or something, not me. But anyway, long story short, I mean, certainly you could think about just making short videos of, "Hey, let me just show you where our style guideline is, and let me just show you a few things in the style guideline if you haven't seen it." We got to think about a place where to put the videos, but we could all certainly start, just making short videos of, "Oh, let me show you our issue list or good first issues." So I mean, obviously I'd coordinate with you, Caitlin, but some thoughts there. If there's different parts of our world, even just showing them, "Hey, did you know you can go see the docs and try them in all these different languages?" Things like that, things we typically do when we do the sprint education, what I think I'll transfer over pretty well.
Yeah, I'm more convinced about this idea of an introductory video as I hear more and more about it. I just want to put that out there because I've been on that video side of this debate for a while.
Mm-hmm.
The more I hear about it, the more you're making the case. I guess the question I have is I don't know what the question I have is. It's really
I'm going to time box this discussion to a max of 5 more minutes, just so that we make sure to get to the Goldmark issue. But please continue, Celeste. Sorry.
No, I haven't crystallized my thoughts. I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll find is, the nice thing about the videos is they don't cost us much once you make them. It is a little fun if you haven't done a video before, you listen to yourself, you're like, how do I sound so boring, right? I got to get my energy level up. I mean, so that first video is a little rough, but it is kind of I think it's one of those kind of things that it doesn't cost us much to try, and hopefully it gets us some traction. That's kind of how I view it. I mean, and as for training, I'm motivated because, I watched this video on actually how to build a gaming computer with my son. When I watched the video, if I didn't have that video, man, it would have been, I don't know, the house would have blown up, to be honest. But if you see my Twitter feed, that computer's running. So there's your success point.
It's a pretty elegant machine.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything, I guess, what's the votable proposal here?
To proactively feel comfortable encouraging folks to come join us. And the other one goes with Caitlin to think about those introductory videos. I mean, I'll get my courage up, Caitlin, and maybe make one too, or two or something.
So maybe we can put that as, should we adopt an explicit posture of welcome? Does that work?
Yeah.
All right. Adopt an explicit posture of welcome. Adopted. All right, Jim, Black Friday versus Goldmark.
Hey,
Light the fire.
This will be really quick, hopefully. It's really just looking for alignment here while we have all the folks on a call saying, do we want all the pain now or do we want all the pain later? And what has happened is that we're about 10 versions behind of updating our Hugo version. And we've created a PR to update to the latest Hugo version, which takes a new default markdown rendering engine called Goldmark. And it breaks a lot of stuff. There is the option to upgrade Hugo to the latest version and still use Black Friday, which I believe would break less stuff temporarily. I see Zach's voting right now.
So we're not at the vote yet.
So there's the ability for us here to ease some of the pain to get to a later version for the sake of not falling further behind. Or the vote is, let's go to Gold Friday. Now I'm combining the two. Go to Goldmark, deal with the pain, and some things might break, but kind of the breaks makes to make an omelet saying, I think rings true here.
Jim, forgive me. Do you have an issue open or with like a sample PR of how things would break?
Yeah, so I've got two PRs open. So that's the other piece as well.
Oh, that was the safe, unsafe?
Correct. Yeah. So Goldmark by itself has two options to run. One is safe and one is unsafe. The real difference is that the unsafe allows you to put scripts embedded into your markdown documentation. And when you put that script in your markdown documentation, the idea is somebody could inject something malicious into your code by adding a malicious script. So that's what the whole safe versus unsafe option is. But then both versions, on top of the whole safe scripts versus unsafe scripts, they also disable pure HTML files. So what that means is that all our API ref gens break, everything that's pure HTML breaks. If it's not markdown, it's going to be broken.
And that's all of the Netlify warnings that we've been getting too, yes?
That I'm not entirely sure about. I believe that's a separate redirect issue for Netlify. But
oh,
yes.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, in my brain.
Yeah, no problem. So like I said, while I have everybody on the call, if we say Black Friday's out, good riddance. All right, so then we're going to go forth Goldmark, but there's going to be some growing pains and in talking about the best way to move this forward.
Shit. Sorry, pardon my language. So as much as I really want to put Black Friday as far behind us as possible, I do think that we need to be ready for that kind of breakage, that level of breakage. So this might be a great time to organize a sprint around that. Like that actually makes a very well-defined sprint. So one thing that comes to mind is, and this is like an unrelated, a tangentially related issue, is once Doxy is applied, then we can look at migrating our API reference to those Swagger docs that will get them out of HTML and into a more renderable format. Oh, Jim, this brings me great pain, but I think it may be worthwhile to do the upgrade version that allows us to operate unsafely. But I am open, very, very open, and very hopeful to be wrong that that's the best solution to go forward. So if I am wrong,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, just please tell me I'm wrong about that.
What I was going to clarify is that the safe versus unsafe is whether or not it allows embedded HTML scripts, but both of the versions don't allow pure HTML.
Well, great.
Wait, sorry, you said they don't allow pure HTML?
Do not. And when I say that, I mean you could write HTML as like a template that gets generated, and at the end of the day, everything is generated as Markdown and presented. But if we created a pure HTML file somewhere in the site and embedded it, it will show up as just plain text. It won't show up as a generated HTML page.
So in the, like, I'm thinking of a blog post specifically. If we have a mix of Markdown and HTML in a blog post, would the HTML break?
Yes, all the HTML would break in that.
And just to clarify as well, so basically all the top level pages under content EN, so training, partners, community, are an underscore index.html page with a bit of front matter attached. All of those theoretically break. Spicy.
All of the underscore index, yeah.
And the
Well,
gigantic API reference page.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry that I helped usher in that gigantic HTML API reference page. With what I know now, when the person proposed that, I would have just said no. For whatever that's worth, it just was not a good idea. It's caused all kinds of problems, and here's another one.
Yeah. Well, how time critical is this, Jim?
I think it's going to get progressively worse the more that we don't upgrade. So Hugo's going to continue iterating. Hugo making the change to Goldmark has caused Bjorn to make more releases of Hugo as they iterate on top of implementing Goldmark as the new standard. So I see that releases are coming out faster, and we're getting further behind pretty much weekly.
Okay.
I got one sort of broad question here. How do the rest of you feel about this? When I hear that we're using Hugo, and Hugo has made the decision that they will not support HTML pages, that to me seems unbearable. You know, that just seems like, what are we thinking to go with a tool that would put that restriction on us? Do the rest of you share that outrage, or do you just think this is the way things are?
I agree. That's kind of my initial reaction as well.
I might be on the outlier here, thinking it's a good move. And the reason I say that is that if you want to be a Markdown rendering engine and your Markdown is not only rendering, more than just Markdown, I believe the scope might have been too wide to begin with. And, it's more of a, as things evolve, it's more of a safe approach. Pure HTML, or not pure HTML, pure Markdown, getting rendered by a pure Markdown rendering engine to HTML makes a lot more sense than a Markdown plus HTML getting rendered down into that. And then additionally to that, you still are able to create your templates and your shortcodes. You just aren't able to have a Markdown content source for the end result. So they're saying use our product the way it should be used. And I said they, but that's my opinion, is that this is a direction to be a little bit more secure, a little bit safer, a little bit cleaner. But it's kind of a slap in the face. I mean, I will give everybody that, but I'm kind of for it.
And Celeste, you just chimed in, but I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't want to override Jim too much. So because of my position in the CNCF, I work with a lot of other Hugo sites, and a lot of the other Hugo sites in the CNCF are on more recent versions of Hugo. So I've dealt with this issue in a couple of other repos already. And I echo what Jim says, is it really forces you to use better development practices. Like it forces you when you're trying to embed, say, a PDF presentation or a YouTube video, instead of just getting a little bit messy about it and dropping in an embed code and then walking away, it forces you to say, well, am I going to embed one YouTube video once, or am I going to embed 15 YouTube videos across the site? And therefore, should I be developing a shortcode template for this so I can have reusability? So from a development and maintenance perspective, it forces you to behave better, which is almost never a bad thing. However, if you really look at the Kubernetes website, like the individual top level pages, those aren't a problem. Those are kind of easier to deal with and to convert into like layout components effectively. However, it gets really complicated for websites like this one when you have like the API reference where the content just happens to be in HTML format because that's how we could export it. And then you suddenly have to get into this place of like, do we develop a pipeline to render JSON into like a markdown so that it gets really weird there. So I think it's the right direction.
Well,
Okay, so I'm sorry, I need to time box. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I need to time box this discussion because we've got 5 minutes left. We can't break the reference page in production. We just cannot do it without a very clear without a very clear plan for how we are immediately going to fix it. So
the big reference page you're talking about?
The reference page, yep. Other pieces will break, can break. We're gonna set fire to our site when we do this. I agree. At a theoretical level, I agree that it forces us into better development practices. I will point out that other CNCF projects have sites with maybe 30 pages tops. We are cruising around with like an order of magnitude more.
Let me just
a couple times that.
Really quickly. Throw away that whole idea of a single HTML page for the API ref docs. Go back to what we should have done in the first place, was just use tools provided by the engineering team to produce a bunch of markdown docs. And once we've done that, proceed in this direction of.
How long will that take and who's going to drive it?
Well, how long would that take? I'll see if I can estimate that. Going back to those other scripts, I would say if you could bring Kubernetes engineering in on it, you could do that in a month.
So Karen, you say that the API ref isn't affected. Say more about that.
So who did you ask that question?
Yeah,
Karen.
I was just looking at, Jim, at your two PRs, and I could have sworn I looked at the previews and check it out. And that's why I posed a little question as far as, is it just HTML that's embedded that the processor complains about if the reference is just a link in a markdown page? So I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I think it might be true. Same thing with the kubectl reference.
Interesting.
Okay. Real quick, can I just say Black Friday's done. We want to go forward with Goldmark for sure, no matter what pane we end up. Okay, fair.
Yes. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, and we've clearly got a lot more to discuss here. So I think this may be the time to wrap it, and I am kicking myself because I wish that we had slotted this first, and that's on me.
To be fair, I added it late in the game.
All good. So what day is it? It's Wednesday. At our next weekly meeting, let's plan on hashing this out at whatever day that is, the 8th of April. Or no, the 7th. The 7th. Let's plan on this being basically what we discuss at the weekly meeting on the 7th.
Jim, I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked into it yet. Is there some documentation you can send us to on what this looks like so we can review before next week?
Yep. Yeah. In the PR itself, there's a whole list of a bunch of stuff that's blown up or having problems. And there's also links to some of the change logs as well.
Okay. Everyone do your homework, and we'll come let's come ready to discuss specific plans of action for how to go forward with this on weekly meeting on Tuesday. All right. Normally I would ask for more business, but we're out of time. So thank you, everyone. Really good participation, really good feedback and input. This is what makes the SIG work. You are all amazing and we're wonderful together. So thank you. Have a good week. Take care.
Thank you. See y'all later.
Bye. Bye.